Since the release of its first season back in 2017, it didn't take long for The Sinner to become the greatest crime drama in the history of the USA Network. And with an ensemble cast and twisting story, it's really no wonder that each season improved with time. But what are the Easter eggs that have escaped fans until now? And what could they tell us about Season 4? Stay tuned, as we're about to find out. Number 1. The overall nature of the show. First up on our list is something that often gets ignored because of the insane drama that fans are often subjected to throughout the runtime of each season. It's also something that sets the show apart from the rest of the crime dramas we've come to love over the years. We are, of course, referring to the fact that The Sinner is an anthology series. And for those of you who don't know, this simply means that 1 to 3 of the franchise exist independently of one another. The only true connection between them appears to be the existence of a singular character, the caring detective Harry Ambrose, who is so perfectly portrayed by the charismatic Bill Pullman. The great thing about the anthology series is that fans can choose where to begin. Whether you decide to start with season 1 or 3, you'll be in precisely the same place once each installment has been completed, with no spoilers for any of the previous seasons being given in either season 2 or 3. In other words, it's always the perfect time to start watching the franchise, with new viewers never having to binge previous seasons in an attempt to catch up. And, according to showrunner Derek Simmons, this makes The Sinner more realistic. The overall nature of the show is supposed to represent the daily working of a detective, like Ambrose, who is constantly being involved in a variety of mysterious cases. It's crazy how much a simple formation can mean. Number 2. The baptism of Cora Tenetti. Another hidden reference takes place in the critically acclaimed first season of the show, which introduces us to the peculiar character of Cora Tenetti, as brought to life by the talented Jessica Biel. When we first see Cora, she is swimming in the ocean with her family waiting for her on the shore of the crowded beach. But the audience is quick to realize that there's something wrong with her. She dunks her head under the water and comes up for air a few seconds later, an action which is often associated with worry and pain. But she seems to be happy, so this thought is quickly thrown away. That is, until she turns around and stabs a young man multiple times in the chest. We later discover that this was all the result of her past, which saw her drugged by a nefarious doctor so that she would forget what had happened to her all those years ago. So when she finally heard the song that was playing on the night she was first kidnapped, she subconsciously released her rage on the unexpected victim, who she otherwise had no connection to whatsoever. There is a lot going on here, which is why fans forget what had happened just before things went down. Going back though, the dunking of her head under the water actually resembles a baptism of sorts, with Cora coming to the surface as a different woman. Number 3, a subtle reference to the Manchurian Candidate. This isn't the only hidden reference found in season 1 of the franchise though. You see, after being kidnapped by Dr. Belmont and injected with drugs in an attempt to make her forget about the death of her sister, Phoebe, Cora carries on with her life and even gets married to JD as if nothing had happened. We're not exactly sure what became of Phoebe in the end, and why her disappearance/death didn't wake Cora up from her slumber before, but we'll give the showrunners the benefit of the doubt and say that this was the resultant of the medication Cora was dosed with. Either way, the murderous character forgets all about the horrific night and following week that had her tied up and losing the most important person in her life. We don't know any of this when she flies off the handle and stabs Frankie Belmont though. In fact, we don't even know that she has a history with the man until the very end of the season. All we really know is that a song in the background appeared to be behind the snap. And while this wasn't a case of brainwashing per se, the scene reminds us of something straight out of Manchurian Candidate, a film that revolves around the Russian sleeper agents who embedded themselves in society only to rise up when a specific condition was met. And while she wasn't a spy in the end, the thought definitely crossed our minds. Number 4, the untrustworthy narrator and its connection to Memento. And then we have the classic start of each and every season of The Sinner. For those of you who have yet to take the leap and watch the show, there's a specific formula used that fans have come to love. Seasons 1 to 3 all start with a particular crime, whether it be the murder of Frankie Belmont or the image of young Julian sitting between the lifeless bodies of his parents. Either way, we are enticed with a mystery, knowing full well that not everything is as it seems. But since the leading characters are always a bit fried mentally as a result of what they've been through, it goes without saying that they aren't exactly the most trustworthy of narrators. This puts the audience in the same position as Detective Ambrose, who wants to discover the truth despite the falsities being told to him by the other characters in the scene. Cora, for example, really believed that there was no connection to Frankie Belmont whatsoever. But when we reach the end of season 1, nothing could be farther from the truth. This has caused many experts to connect the premise of the franchise to the real-world class film, Memento, which stars Guy Pearce as Leonard Shelby, a man tasked with the hunting down and killing of the man who took his wife's life. Shelby was an untrustworthy narrator after all, who suffered from anterograde amnesia and couldn't remember what was what because of this. Number 5. The Calling of Detective Ambrose. As we mentioned earlier, Detective Ambrose is the only solid connection between the various seasons of The Sinner. In fact, it's he who is considered to be the leading character, even though he sometimes takes a more supporting role, while the audience concentrates more on the victim and alleged perpetrator of the crime being investigated. But as time goes on, we also realize that Ambrose is incredibly flawed as a character. He isn't as put together as we are first led to believe, with the things he's been through being the reason for him wanting to solve crimes and help the general public. Suffice to say, if he was a superhero, he would most certainly be Batman, a flawed protagonist who isn't ashamed to do what must be done in an effort to bring cases to a close. But that's not the only detective Harry Ambrose has been compared to. In fact, he appears to be the reincarnation of one of the greatest detective characters of all time. We are, of course, referring to the one and only Sherlock Holmes of 221B Baker Street. Like Ambrose, Sherlock suffers from some personal issues ranging from drug abuse to the inability to separate from work and personal life. But in spite of these downfalls, it's the incredible nature of the detective that keeps us rooting for him. And it goes without saying, but we get a very similar vibe from Harry Ambrose as well. Number 6. The unpredictability of Season 3. We've already mentioned how The Sinner was created to represent the classic journey of a detective, like Ambrose, and explains why an anthology format is such a great option for the running of the franchise. But what you might not have realized about the 3rd season of the show is that this format was somewhat flipped on its head. Rather than dealing with the blocking out of a traumatic event, as was the case with Cora Tonetti, we dive into the strange friendship between two characters by the name of Jamie and Nick. What's peculiar about them is the fact that they like to stare death in the face, often doing things in an attempt to feel more alive. And since Jamie appears to have let his buddy die in a car crash earlier on, we experience a brand new formula that differs vastly from the first 2 seasons. There is no real blocking out of specific events, and instead of seeing things from the leading murderer's perspective, we see things from the viewpoint of Ambrose. We also come to see that the detective is getting closer to the leading characters of the murderers as the seasons progress, which may indicate that the same is due for season 4, but essentially this serves the same purpose as previously and represents the unpredictability of the life of a detective. And there you have it, some of the best Easter eggs from The Sinner. What did you think of the show though? And did we forget any of your favorite references? Be sure to let us know in the comments section down below.